So now let's get digital. So we've been talking a lot about people-to-people contacts, how we work in coalitions on the human side, and now it's time to look at the digital side of the equation, which I must admit has been a big focus, at least on the disinformation side of our different work. So this next panel is going to be moderated. Where is Ryan? So Ryan Katz-Rosine, he's the associate professor from the University of Ottawa, and would ask the panelists to also come up. And Tully Grutz, from professor and Canadian research chair in privacy at the Toronto Metropolitan University and co-director of Social Media Lab. Thank you. Alex Hernandez-Garcia, assistant professor at the Université de Montréal, and Mila. Patrick McCurdy, who's been with us before, including at our launch from the University of Ottawa, and Aditi Ramesh, policy manager of Check My Ads. So what people see, search, and share about the climate is increasingly shaped by digital systems. This is something that we've talked about throughout the morning. And these systems are often systems they neither control nor understand. So this session will explore how the digital platforms and AI systems are reshaping the climate information environment, the risks and opportunities they create, and the implications for democratic participation and effective climate action. So Ryan, we'll put this in your good hands. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're getting right into the next panel, so let's dive in. Welcome everyone. My name, as you've just heard, is Ryan Katz-Rosine. I'm a professor here at the University of Ottawa, based at the School of Political Studies and the Institute of Environment, and cross-pointed to geography. And my research interests lie in contentious climate politics, contentious climate policy debates, this panel is of considerable interest in that regard. This is all about the intersection between digital platforms, artificial intelligence, and the climate information environment, and there's a lot to talk about. The online world and social media platforms in particular have served as a primary space for the spreading and flourishing of both climate misinformation and disinformation. And AI technologies have only amplified the volume and scale of the misinformation fire hose. That said, perhaps there are opportunities to reshape digital platforms and use them to our advantage to help combat misinformation. And that's one of the things I'm really, looking forward to hearing about from our panelists today. So without further ado, I'll do another quick intro to our speakers. They're all very accomplished folks, but rather than give you the whole, long list of accolades for each and every one of them, I thought I'd just highlight one recent professional accomplishment and a little tidbit. I've asked them to share a little tidbit about themselves that you probably don't know, just to kind of animate that and maybe animate the networking session after. You can go and ask some of these little quirks. So Anatoly Grusht is a professor at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Toronto Metropolitan University, and he holds a Canada Research Chair in Privacy Preserving Digital Technologies and co-leads the Social Media Lab. This area of focus, climate misinformation, digital platforms that we're talking about today, really is his beat. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Now, one thing you probably didn't know about Anatoly, in a past life, he ventured into professional dancing. And he'd like you to know, he'd be happy to teach anyone here interested in learning the Ukrainian hopak. Aditi Ramesh is a policy manager at the Check My Ads Institute based in Los Angeles, California. One recent professional achievement, she spoke at the Climate Information Integrity Summit in Brasilia earlier this year on incentives to information integrity and digital advertising. And one thing the audience will not know is that she's an avid rock climber. She spent much of her summer climbing in the, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here, but the Tuolumne Meadows, Tuolumne, and the eastern side of Yosemite Valley. Alex Hernandez-Garcia, on the far side, is an assistant professor at the Université de Montréal and a core academic member at Mila, the Quebec AI Institute. One recent professional achievement is his contribution to creating thisclimatedoesnotexist.com, which is a website designed to allow visitors to visualize the impacts of climate change, such as floods, on existing street photos. And this is modeled with generative machine learning. One thing you may not know is he's a musician and currently mostly plays the violin, but he also plays the bagpipe, and he's played at multiple international festivals with his band from Madrid, Lume de Biqueira. He challenged me on my pronunciation, but little do you know, one thing you don't know is that I was born in Latin America. And yeah, okay. Sorry. Finally, Patrick McCurdy is a professor here at the University of Ottawa at the Department of Communication. He recently published a co-authored paper on the use of woke, I'm assuming that's the use of the word, woke, in the Canadian parliamentary discourse. And something you may not know is he once donated an object that's now part of the collection at the Canadian Museum of History. What that object is, I don't know, and you can ask him during the break. Okay, let me just tell you how we're going to, unroll this session, this panel. I've asked each of our panelists to address one central question, and they each have 5 minutes, maximum 6 minutes, to answer this question. And then, after each panelist, I'll turn it over to another panelist just to give us a 1-minute response, just to kind of get us to start thinking critically about what we're hearing. What comes to mind when they hear their fellow panelists. And then after we've heard from everyone, we'll move on to the discussion. And so the question that I asked them is as follows. In your view, what is the one most pressing way that digital platforms and artificial intelligence and similar technologies are shaping climate narratives and public discourse, and what opportunities exist to harness them for more effective climate communication and action? So first up, we have Anatoly and Aditi. I'm going to turn to you for just a 1-minute response.
I'm waiting 2 seconds. Hi, everyone. So I know this event is a culmination of a series of events that organizers hosted online and offline, and it's really great to see everybody in person. I really enjoyed panel discussions earlier, and I'm really excited about talking about this important issue of digital platforms, AI, and how it intersects with misinformation, disinformation, and specifically climate-related content. So thank you, Ryan, for these introductions, and my remarks today, I only have 5 minutes, so I decided to, instead of focusing on climate misinformation specifically, I know my colleagues on the panel will dive deeper in that topic. I'm going to do a bit broader aspect, looking at digital platforms and generative AI, because I think it's important to understand how Canadians use them, what their attitudes towards Gen AI technology. Why? Because we can understand risk and potential benefits of this technology in the context of climate misinformation, but also other types of information domains. So I have 3 highlights from a recent survey that we conducted with 1,500 Canadians at the Social Media Lab, where we asked them about generative AI. And so the first essentially point, we discovered that, surprisingly to us, 2/3 of Canadians said they've tried generative AI either for work, study, or entertainment. So 2/3 is quite a large number. Because our survey was national, we were quite surprised about that. But then when we prompted a little bit more about, are you really confident using these tools? Only 1/3 of them said that yes, we kind of, but not really, because we did a test, the basic AI knowledge test with the same folks, and the scores were not that great. So that was kind of what they did admitted it, that they were not that ready. So that was one highlight. The second highlight from this survey was that the public we surveyed concerned about manipulated content, and output of these generative AI models in general. They felt they're not ready to interpret those outputs. And they do, number three, they do demand accountability. They do want to see companies be responsible for the content they put out there, especially if it causes harm. They don't want to black boxes, essentially. And unfortunately, what we see, and it's this concerning trend where a company with generative AI product slapped this disclaimer at the end saying that, well, whatever I just showed you is all fake news, so don't trust me. So it kind of creates this devaluation of any kind of information, creates this environment that, well, we're not responsible, even if it's fake, and get used to it kind of situation. So just to summarize, many people said they're encountering AI in the wild, and probably if we do survey now, probably more would say so, because more products integrate Gen AI, search engines, Office, docs, and such. And they worry about false and misleading claims those tools may generate, and they expect platform to carry at least some responsibilities. So I don't want to focus on all doom and gloom, because I think the panel is most productive where we discuss solutions and approaches. So I'll outline 4 different possible approaches, and hopefully we will dive deeper during the panel. So the first one, of course, automated detection of this type of content. It's not easy task. One of our project, 5-year project, trying to detect this content, and we already realizing it's quite difficult. But there are workarounds. Instead of perhaps looking at the individual pieces of generative AI content and trying to detect those, you also look at the actors, who's spreading it, what is the pattern of spread of certain type of claims or piece of information, whether there's a signs of inauthentic coordinated behavior as such. So there are ways to detect that. And why do we need to use automated tools, kind of fight fire with fire? Because humans are not scalable. We can't really judge millions of posts every day, and even though X will tell you, well, community knows the crowd sourcing works as a reviewers works great, but it doesn't. But also, it's still not possible to review millions of posts a day. So automation is the key. We know it's not foolproof, so we still need to rely on human judgment, because we can bring context and knowledge and judgment, more importantly, to this equation. So I always tell in my classes, you have to have human in the loop. So don't forget about us, otherwise we'll be obsolete quite soon. And when we're talking about humans in the loop, we do need to train them. There are some studies showing how even a little bit of training helps people to detect Gen AI content through different modalities, either it's text-based, audio, visual. It does help, even though those outputs becoming more and more realistic, there are still clues and signs that people can learn. And it's not just training professionals like journalists and such, fact checkers, it's the public. The more eyeballs we have on these products, the better. Think about the traditional software development cycle. You want to find bugs, you want to introduce more players, more users, and maybe you can rewards them. The white hacking schema where you can pay money for somebody trying to hack your system, that's the stuff we need to do more of it with the new systems. 2 more kind of possible approaches that can work in some form of combination. So the next one will be certification and labeling. I was carrying this tag that you all got on the backs. So it's kind of certifying that the conference bag we got, it's made as recyclable cotton. It's a form of labeling, right? It carries a lot of meaning. So we need to more of this for the digital content, but of course platforms say we're not in business of fact checking. They break partnership with fact checkers, a horrible situation all around. So what do we do? Well, maybe we need to look at where these objects are created at source. So perhaps labeling, incorporating some digital fingerprinting, watermarking really would help. So we need to do more of it. Adobe is trying to do some of it, but it's mostly for copyright-related issues, kind of embedding certain bits into the images, for example, so they can say, oh, this image actually came from our products. Don't steal it from us, even though we stole training data from somebody else. So these are some of the possible solutions. Clearly, they're not going to work one solution at a time. We need to have hybrid approach, so that hopefully we can design systems that kind of support trust or some sort of it. They also support democratic participation, hopefully, and maybe it leads us to more productive climate action overall. So I look forward to discussing these topics, and over to our next panelists. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And I do want to turn over to Aditi for just one brief reflection. What does that make you think of?
Yeah, and thank you for your work on the survey. I had read it before the panel and find it really interesting to hear more about public perception to new technologies. This makes me think about, and also in an intersection with the work I'll talk about later, but the numerous effects that generative AI has on our information ecosystem, and particularly as it's being used to develop and fabricate news and journalism, and how often like the business model of the internet is monetization, and it's monetizing a lot of this information around generative AI. And so there is a clear incentive for generative AI to keep like spewing this disinformation. And so the influx of these new sites have really diverted a lot of funding away from reliable media and journalism, and is just a secondary effect on our information ecosystem.
Perfect, thank you. So our next speaker will be Patrick McCurdy. And again, you have 5-6 minutes. You can speak from there or from the podium, whatever your preference is.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about two things. First is greenwashing and online ads, so programmatic advertising, part of a research project I'll talk about in a second. And the second part will be sort of the pivot our research project has had, and both of these link back to, I think, things that we're thinking, like some solutions or two ways that we can think about this issue. So I'm here on the back of work that I'm doing with Chris Russell and Jenny Cleaver, a paper which is looking specifically at programmatic greenwashing. And it's part of a larger shirk that Chris and I have looking at greenwashing in Canada, in Canada's oil sands industry. And so I want to share a couple insights from this paper and then talk a bit about how a pivot from this, this paper that took place in May and how we're thinking about stuff. So when we're looking at programmatic greenwashing, we're looking specifically at the type of automated ads that you will see when you do a Google search. And of course, you're going to think that the type of search results that you've gotten have changed dramatically since May, and that's part of this pivot that we're doing. But we're looking at the use of ad technology and keyword targeting in Google search, specifically by the Pathways Alliance, who is responsible for 95% of Canada's oil sands industry. So at the start and doing this research, actually, it was incredibly difficult to do for us to try and get the keywords which were used to have these ads appear. And it was actually a very expensive project to do. This is part of the challenge of having a monopoly that Google has with this information and its stakeholders. So one of the immediate solutions, something that I'm sure we'll cover, is thinking about more transparency and more accountability on that front, and also viewing Google as actually active in using their AI and algorithm and generating these greenwashing ads. So we actually had to pay, like I said, a bunch of cash to collect this data, and we were curious to see what keywords was Pathways using when they were taking out advertisements. And so what you should know about programmatic advertising, you've all seen them on the search engine result pages. These are sort of data-driven AI sort of generated ads based on user searches. So we collected 2 years worth of data that we purchased between 2022 and 2024 and contrasted the paid keywords to organic search results. And notice this is across 1,150 ads and a whole bunch of keywords. And we saw three broad strategies that Pathways was using. And if any of you have ever had to take out an AdSense account or buy keywords, you're probably familiar with this process. It really was, for me, like a learn by doing to see what this looks like and see how much of it is really automated and how AI is involved in suggesting keywords. But what we see in the strategies, we see Pathways targeting keywords related to climate solutions, related to net zero, related to using keywords such as climate solutions. So, for example, when the greenhouse gas inventory was released, which shows that the oil sands is Canada's sort of worst sector for greenhouse gas emissions, they're Canada's biggest polluter, they were buying the keywords for Canada's greenhouse gas inventory as a search term. So if you're searching for the greenhouse gas inventory, you're getting a programmatic ad by Pathways appearing. We also gathered all the Pathways ads and analyzed those discursively. We engaged in a qualitative coding process that I can talk about later, or after. But the two more strategies, one was, as you might expect, the strategies would evolve with current events. So they would take out ads around, say, COP28, right? So if you're searching for information on COP28, then you would get an ad about pathways and an ad telling you that they have their net zero, their strategy for net zero. Now, of course, all this changed when the Competition Bureau had their new greenwashing law. They've sort of pivoted to a sort of a sports washing strategy. But the third practice, and then I'll tell you about our pivot in the time left, was a practice of what's called in the literature conquesting, which just essentially means they would take out ads. So you see their net zero ads appear when you search for competitors or critics like the Pembina Institute, like Carleton's Reclimate, or even government institutions like ECCC. So you'd search for them and you'd get fed a Pathways ad. And of course, this is because they're looking for people who are interested in climate information and they want to try and intercept that. So what that points to is the first idea of the need to sort of switch. I'm Gen X, but switch from this Gen X view of greenwashing. Greenwashing isn't just billboards and radio ads and magazine ads. And even then, like, we think through what that looks like, but look at the role of this programmatic ads involved. And then, of course, this pivot, which I'll talk about briefly for 1 minute. I can see I have 1 minute. Is in May of this year, when Google had its I/O summit, we were already seeing changes to search, and we were already thinking about changes to greenwashing, thinking about it in a programmatic way. But really, as you think about how your own practices of searches have changed, and you might be asking ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Claude various questions where before you would have asked a search, then we need to think about what are the realities presented across various LLMs, right? Because you've seen a whole mushrooming industry of what's called either GEO, generative engine optimization, or AI SEO. So I've jumped into a bunch of like marketing groups which are talking about offering clients how they can try and get their own data consumed by these LLMs to say if you're searching what's the best brand of shoes or whatever, you're gonna get Nike in there. But there's an interesting tension in computer science where they're sort of looking at this as problematic and marketing as an opportunity. So where I'm pivoting to now as part of still looking at greenwashing, but is to track LLM outputs across over time, right? And see, is this changing? Is this changing because of internal tweaks that's made behind the scenes? Or is it changing because, there's efforts now to try and put out press releases, segment your text, all these sorts of things, or generating mass amounts of text to get gobbled up and fed back into these LLMs. So that way what becomes interesting is finding a way to look at, is there some sort of convergence across models over time? Is there a difference in the representation of reality that they're presenting? Because if we're using these as source of truths, it becomes important to track. So I asked last night, just testing this tool that we've built and are using, I asked it if Antifa was a terrorist organization, yes or no. And right now, the response across the 30 models I tested said no. And of course, if there are some tweaks to the weights and balances, which you won't see if they change, if they have a stub, you might see yes, right? Does this differ? Do the responses you get, do they differ based on VPN address? So there's a lot of questions that we need to think about as LLMs shift to these models of knowledge, if we see these as operating systems for future businesses, if these are sources of truths, we need to track this as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Perfect, right on time. And I should have stressed that Alex will turn to you for just a 1 minute reflection, what you're thinking of.
Yeah, just quickly, and hi everybody. I hear you talk about your research, and I really take it as a preamble of what I would like to talk about, because I also want to talk about big tech and their implication in really disrupting climate action. I think this shows a very compelling example, and I'll leave it there because I'll talk more about this when my turn comes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next up we have Aditi, and after Aditi, we'll just get quick reflection from Patrick.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about digital advertising, and we've heard throughout the sessions today about about the business model of the internet and the profit incentives really behind mis and disinformation. And so I'm just going to delve a little bit deeper into that and kind of break down what exactly is going on under the hood of digital advertising. There's a numerous amount of companies, technology companies, AI systems that are shaping online climate discourse every day. And there's two distinct issues in digital ad monetization. There's ad content and publisher content. And ad content was what we just heard from Patrick, the specific content of the ad and the advertiser that's placing ads in digital systems. And then there's publisher content, which is largely where we're focused at Check My Ads, which is the issue of the app or the site content that is being monetized. So let's say you see an advertisement for a major beverage brand that is on a site that is peddling climate disinformation. And it's more often than not, ads from reputable brands are funding and promoting disinformation or hateful content, even when they have strict policies against doing so. And this constitutes two secondary issues for advertisers and our information ecosystem. One is that if climate disinformation is being placed next to an ad from a reputable brand, it gives that disinformation more validity. Someone says, hey, this major brand that I trust is on this site, so they may consider that brand to be endorsing those views. And conversely, if someone reads an article with false or misleading information, they cognitively distrust that brand more, causing a loss in brand favorability. And oftentimes brands don't have any insight into where their ad dollars are ending up and why they're being placed on these sites. So let's talk a little bit about why this is happening. And at Check My Ads, we do a lot of research and investigations to kind of shine a light in these dark corners of the digital advertising industry to show folks what's actually going on underneath. So, we've heard a lot today about how big tech companies have really cemented themselves across the internet and in many corners of our industry and society. They're establishing norms that benefit themselves and to the detriment of users. And there are hundreds of other ad tech companies in this supply chain that are also involved in this process. And so before modern digital advertising, advertisers would run ad campaigns and work with an agency to identify publications or programs who deemed a target audience and who would be the right fit for their content. And today, advertisers and agencies have to navigate a really complex supply chain of companies and organizations that work to get this placement done. And these are what we call intermediaries in the supply chain. And so these can be ad tech companies, agencies that plan and execute campaigns on behalf of advertisers, data brokers that are targeting users, ad verification companies that are supposed to confirm ad placements on publisher sites. And so for every dollar that an advertiser is spending, each intermediary gets a percentage share or a revenue share. And most publishers and tech platforms receive payment based on volume of clicks, of impressions, of overall views that an ad is seeing. And every company in the middle stands to gain by having money pass through their system. And so we like to think about the digital advertising ecosystem like a financial market where there are many intermediaries and there needs to be more transparency into who these intermediaries are, who they're working with, and also giving advertisers more control over where their money is actually going. And I think we'll get to talk about solutions a little bit later, but just a couple of ones that we advocate for, both like policy and a regulatory level at Check My Ads. The first one is transparency. Advertisers have really minimal understanding of where, by whom, and where their ads are going, whether or not they're funding climate misinformation. And so we advocate for advertisers to have placement data, which is specific log-level data that shows exactly where their ads are ending up with each transaction down to the page. Right now, most advertisers only receive domain-level data, which is the URL, and in the reporting, and that is not necessarily indicative of what content is being displayed on that site. And the second solution that we also advocate for is a know your customer rule, which is advertisers should know or be able to know who are the intermediaries, specifically who are the intermediaries within the supply chain, and disclosures around where the business is incorporated, confirmation of their legal identity, and broadly just an understanding of how this is passing through the system.
Perfect, thank you. Pat, any quick?
Yeah,
how do you think about this?
I really like the work that Check My Ads does. It makes me think about just the role that we can have as educators to incorporate this type of work into what we teach. When we teach political economy, often we're sort of stuck and getting into that gray area. So I think it's a good reminder to, when we're looking at digital political economy, at least for me when I teach it, to sort of jump into the examples from your work.
Great. Okay, our final speaker for the panel is Alex, and then after your remarks, Anatoly, will turn to you for a quick response.
Sure. Yeah, so I would like to take a step back kind of and start reflecting upon the broad impact of AI on climate change and the climate discourse, AI as well as digital platforms more generally. And like we've been hearing throughout the day, I'm sorry to kind of again bring the perspective that in my opinion, so far this impact is absolutely disastrous. We've been hearing about how these digital platforms are, like I said before, deeply implicated in shaping the climate discourse, and I would say disrupting any efforts for climate action. But also, of course, if we talk about AI and this current large-scale deployment, it's becoming like pervasive across different sectors, something that the general population is using. As we said before, like 2/3 from Anatoly, 2/3 of Canadians are using generative AI. This comes at a cost, obviously. I've done a little bit of research on measuring the impact in terms of energy and carbon emissions of AI. And a few years ago, I used to talk about this as, well, it depends. Not all models are the same, but really the scale we are reaching now, it cannot be denied that there's $1 billion worth investments on data centers all around the world in places that already have, already suffering from access to water, to energy in general, and this is going to make the situation worse. And while it is not the topic of today's panel and summit, I think it's also important to remind that AI is having negative impacts on a lot of different things across the board, like discrimination of underprivileged communities, disinformation more generally, the use on military and implication in genocide, etc., etc. So this is something we have to take into account as well. And thinking about where all these impacts come from, well, I want to make the point that a lot of this is deeply connected to the fact that these kind of technologies are massively controlled by a few players that have a lot of power, a lot of wealth. So we're talking about a few big companies, so big tech, and I think this is at the root of a lot of these problems. We've been discussing today. We heard from from Catherine about this alliance between big tech and fossil fuel industries. So big tech and big oil, they go hand in hand. For example, Microsoft has been developing, $1 billion projects with fossil fuel industries about, using AI to find more oil and make it cheaper for fossil fuel companies. And then at the same time, they will be telling us how they set these goals to become net zero and so on. So this is my piece of bad news. I would say that on a positive note, I still believe that AI and digital platforms can also play a role in contributing to dismantling a little bit this big infrastructure of negative impacts. I think, for example, thinking in terms of climate communication and how AI can be used to come up with creative ways of talking about climate and helping us see, the difficult networks of systems that are sometimes hard to communicate, and how the climate system works, what are the implications, what are the impacts of our actions here on today, in a few years for other people, all these kind of things. I think they are very interesting projects between, for example, artists and climate communication experts, AI experts. I'm very interested in those, and I think there is definitely an opportunity there, and I'll be happy to talk more about that later too.
Thank you. And quick remarks from Anatoly.
More of a question, really, Alex. So you mentioned this website you created, This Climate is Fake, isn't it?
Yeah, this climate does not exist. .com. This climate does not exist.
Does not exist. .com.
Reference to a kind of internet meme.
I was curious. We've seen in the past, national disasters, other forms of disasters, whether there's fire in Alberta or Los Angeles, California. People use fake images to perhaps exaggerate sometimes the extent to which disaster happened, to using partisan content to say, well, not enough is done. Or do you see your website or websites like these can be misused in that way? And what are the kind of guardrails do you put to prevent that misuse?
Yes, unfortunately, yes, and I'll try to be brief here. But yeah, we developed this a few years ago, of course, with the best of our intentions, obviously, and then we did a study on what was the actual impact on users when they interacted in this website with this type of images. And it was very mixed. It did have an effect on a lot of people on kind of encouraging action and taking action. But it depended a lot, and this was work with political scientists. It depended a lot on the political orientation of people who interacted with the system. So, yeah, you are totally right. Depending on where you're coming from, you're gonna see this in different ways.
Sorry, I'm gonna.
we have in our own pen.
This is
here,
great.
Right?
We're gonna turn to this.
I'm sure we'll get.
I want to
that.
ask my question. No, actually, we have about half an hour, I think, and I do want to turn it mostly to the audience, but you're welcome to kind of have your debates. And we've heard enough to get us thinking about this. I want to encourage you to start thinking now about what questions you might want to ask. We've heard about the impact of fake images and AI role in that, the actual impacts of AI itself. We've talked about advertising and misinformation and more. So queue up your questions. I just want to ask a quick question about motivations. I feel like I'm exposed to an inordinate amount of climate misinformation or disinformation or misdirection, and I don't know exactly what the right word is, but on a daily basis, I spend a lot of time on Elon Musk's godforsaken fascist town square. And sorry. No, my perspective is when the fascists show up at the town square, you got to show up and fight back. So my apologies to former speaker, but anyway, that's my point of view. Maybe I'm just self-deluded, but okay. Look, I come across a lot of stuff that's pretty easily debunked. This kind of stuff that's one Google search away from the truth. And my question, sometimes I just wonder, like, where is this coming from? Why are people in various groups doing this? What do they have to gain? We've heard a little bit about the fossil fuel sector, but can you just touch on, from your work, what are the motivations of people and groups and entities that use digital platforms to spread disinformation in particular? What do they really want? Is this really all just about money? Is that what it's about? Is it about sowing political chaos? Is it about, strategic, advancing their strategic communications? Is it about advancing their interests? Is it about changing people's opinions, expanding the Overton window, or just about casting doubt about climate change or something else? So I invite you to jump in on that, but if you would rather not, I'm going to...
In any order?
Whatever, yeah, if you just put up your hand if you'd like to jump in, no pressure.
I can start. And we've heard some of these motivations during the previous panels as well. So some mentioned monetary incentives. So people sometimes do it because, crisis makes money, brings eyeballs, monetization works. Partisanship, so you ask me as what we see in our work, so because we're looking at different kinds of disinformation, and a lot of it coming from state actors and partisan actors, so we see that as a way to, if it's partisan actor, it's a way to create a community of like-minded individuals. It's hard to deal with that one because it's in its own echo chamber circulating. The state actors, also hard to deal because we don't sometimes know are they state actors or not, and platforms not willing nowadays take any action on that. The other area I want to mention, influencers or micro-influencers, where they're working with brand and they might be greenwashing something without realizing or realizing but not caring enough. And so that's another big area as well.
I think I can speak to this question through the perspective of my work in particular, which is that we're really focused on the motivations of the intermediaries in the ecosystem, the ones who are profiting off of misinformation. And just like any other marketplace, and we view the digital advertising ecosystem as a marketplace, there are parties that provide value, and then there are parties that are not. And the parties that provide value are the publishers that are creating content like news or journalism, everyday users who are going to digital platforms and interacting with friends or family, and then advertisers who see ad space online. And then there are parties who do not provide value or are not providing value for us, like these big tech companies, like trade associations who theoretically are supposed to provide a governance for the greater good, but are profiting off of surveillance and data extraction, and are really remaining unfettered by regulation at the moment. And it has really been easier, and I think, like we've touched on earlier, to set up a site or an app and get monetized thanks to AI and thanks to these technology companies. And so misinformation really pays, and I think a lot of people are taking advantage of that system.
In the context of the work that we're doing, it's about maintaining social license. And these are oil companies looking to maintain social license to continue extracting and maximizing the extraction of fossil fuels to sort of maximize shareholder value, make as much money as they can, as long as they can.
I would agree a little to add to that. I think there's a whole range of reasons that we could talk for hours about, the subtle reasons here and there, but I think it's sort of obvious to me that the main reason is it's an economic and financial interest, and the for-profit game that all these technologies are embedded in is able to explain a lot of the problem.
Okay, thank you. I do want to turn it over now to see if there are questions. I see one over here from Hadrian. So yeah, put up your hand nice and high. I think maybe we'll take 2 questions, and if you could just introduce yourself before you ask a question, and we'll turn it to the panel to see how you'd like to answer them. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ryan. Hadrian Mertens-Kirkwood. I'm with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. I would love to get all of your takes on uncertainty, because I think for a lot of us coming from climate, we don't know the future, but we have really good models actually. We have a pretty good sense of where the climate is headed depending on different variables. And as Catherine Hayhoe said this morning, actually we've kind of solved climate change technologically and economically, and we're just have to deal with the politics now. But AI is a very different beast. You can have 5 AI experts in a room and no one knows where AI is going to be in 5 years or 10 years. So unlike climate, where we can make decisions now where we're thinking 20, 30, 50 years into the future, how do we do that with AI at the regulatory level, at the institutional level, even in the educational level, talking about can we train students to identify disinformation? Maybe, but in 6 months, it's going to be different again. So I would just love to get your takes on that uncertainty problem when it comes to this technology.
Excellent. And we'll take another question. I saw a hand.
Hello.
Yes, right here.
Hi everyone, my name is Baljeet and I'm an educator in computer science for almost 2 decades. So I have a question. Patrick was talking about generative AI, and everyone actually around the world is relying, I must say, over-relying on technologies for making decisions, either it is in business or in our personal lives also, isn't it? So my question is that when we are talking about all these generative AI engines, they make decisions on data. And I feel that they can never capture all real-life data. So I want to say that their decisions will always be biased. So there should be always a human in the loop. And young generations are blindly believing on generative AI, because I'm seeing kids using ChatGPTs and Copilot or Gemini as if they are using Google search engine, isn't it? So, I will say that generative AI is not good on factual data because they do not know what is recently happening. They are making searches on historical data, isn't it? So isn't it the time where AI can create a lot of misinformation and disinformation? So my question is that, I don't know your name, but I also talking about the regulations. Young students, when they are using AI, shouldn't we talk to them rather than saying that do not use AI in education, but talking to them ethical and responsible use of AI, when they can rely how to use it for better productivity and for learning perspective rather than just relying on these AI tools.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 2 questions there. I am going to turn to the panel. We're asking, where does AI lead us in the near future in the context of uncertainty, and this question about how to deal with AI bias. And anyone want to jump in? Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, this question of uncertainty is very important, and nobody knows because we're currently at a moment of big fast change on this kind of technology. But I think this will not stay like this forever. I think again, maybe I'm one of those AI people in the room and my colleagues would disagree. But I think this is going to slow down eventually. It's already slowing down, and I'm talking specifically about the AI that has reached the general public, so the AI from OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, etc. But I would also like to emphasize that AI is a lot more than this, and the technologies that we know as AI, it can be very broad. I usually use the term machine learning, but it can be small. It can be very narrowly purposed. It doesn't need to be the big scale general purpose thing that these companies are trying to sell us.
Quickly, when you say you think it'll slow down, I mean, is that kind of saying that this kind of rhetoric about superintelligence down the 5-10 year horizon that you don't see that as realistic? Is that?
Well, of course, I really don't want to make predictions here. This is being recorded, but yes, I'm talking about that. It's gonna come back to me, but it's already slowing down. And we could talk about this, but how OpenAI, for example, had made these big promises about this. I don't even know the names because I'm not a user of these things, but the version 5 was going to disrupt absolutely everything, and they were delaying because the difference with respect to the previous version was actually not that big, apparently. So I'm referring to this. Whether there's going to be some sort of acceleration again, who knows? But the signs today are that this is slowing down.
Okay. Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Anatoly.
That's excellent question about certainty and uncertainty. I'll handle the educational piece. I know you raised an important point, like how do we prepare next generation, related to your point as well, when things change so fast. Reflect back on COVID pandemic, where science was evolving like every week was something new. And I think we as a society globally mobilized and able to do a lot of public service announcements, a lot of educational programming, digital, online, offline, where more or less we try to educate this different sectors of society of changing science, views on vaccines and such. Not always perfect, but it did happen. So I think with AI it's no different. It doesn't mean we need to give up because things will change. We have to update our course outlines. We do it we're at the University of Ottawa today. Many of you academics, you know what I'm talking about. Every semester we have to, brush our syllabuses, updated reading lists. It just means we have to do it a bit faster. Maybe not once in 2 years, maybe once a semester nowadays. But I love what I teach. I teach, let's say, social media analytics, big data management, and those topics, they always change all the time anyway. So for me, dealing with uncertainty, it's fun. It's actually the point of teaching students how to deal with that, and the things will change. The second question, I want to pick on one point you mentioned about historical data. Yes, it used to be that those models that released, they would only spit out based on historical trained data, and they will say knowledge as of 2023. But nowadays they do this system where they do this real-time search, they get latest news, and they summarize your results based on latest. So that's not no longer a problem. And I do like a trend where the models are starting, the conversational chatbots in particular, starting to include sources, referencing, where that whatever they claim it is came from. So I think for students specifically, we need to emphasize that they need to click on those references to double check. If I told them, if you submit me a piece of ChatGPT and I tell you it's not correct, you failed because there was a reference you could have cross-validated yourself.
We have an online question related, shall we?
Let's just see if our panelists want to jump in on that.
I think this question about uncertainty with technology is really hard. And I've been working on tech policy and setting tech policy for the last 6 years. And I think this is constantly the thing that people are dealing with. This technology is changing so quickly and it's so hard to keep up or predict where we're going. Even for example, now in programmatic advertising, there are AI systems that are now deciding where ads get placed. And we just have no understanding or visibility into how these systems work, which is kind of going back to my earlier point, why we really need transparency into AI to even begin to understand how these systems are working across the board in many different applications, and then use that information to then be able to hold some of these companies accountable. And I think the second thing is going back to the previous panel is that it's so important to build diverse coalitions of folks that are working on this. I think technology touches so many different parts of daily life, and I think it's so important to have technologists, academics, civil society folks who are thinking about solutions, how they're affecting communities at various levels, to be able to think about regulation or policymaking long term.
I think the uncertainty question is really interesting. It made me think of this book. I had to double check the title, Super Forecasting. I don't know if you've read it or not, but it makes the argument that we are awful at predicting the future. It looked at some folks who did better than the average person in predicting the future, and it's about reassessing data. So it's a massive challenge to think about and to continually address. And also it's a challenge in the classroom thinking about how do we deal with AI. And prior to the issues with AI and truth, at least in communications, we're thinking about algorithmic bias and various issues around data justice, and so it's carrying forward and porting that literature, teaching that. And I agree with you in terms of talking to students about what AI is, its foundations, how it works, what it's trained on, what does it mean to work or think or write. So as opposed to pretending it's not there and just outright banning it, I did this with Wikipedia in the past, right? I would have assignments where students actually have to work with it, add to it or something to demystify it and think about it critically. So it's a really important strategy for us, for educators.
And I got a signal from Alex, want to jump in
Very
quickly
briefly.
before we go to our...
Yeah, I just also wanted to say a couple of words about the other question about educating students to use these kind of tools. Yes, absolutely, very important. But I also want to emphasize that perhaps it's also important to consider refusal as an option. And we might also have to teach ourselves and our students, everybody, to not abuse certain technologies that we know are harmful for our societies. So that's an option as well.
Okay, thank you. We're going to turn to a digital space question, and then we'll come back to reality land.
Yeah, I saw two hands maybe in the room, but Anonymous question. Anatoly mentioned it's difficult to automate detection of Gen AI content, that it might be more productive to focus on actors. What does that look like when you're trying to reduce the production of misleading information about climate change online?
So that's kind of more digital methods question. And in practice, usually we turn, instead of looking at individual like pictures, videos, we look at the network of actors, users, social media accounts, and how they interact. And quite often, if you have a network of bot accounts or cyborgs where you have humans and bots and partisan actors together, and they all circulate in the same piece of mis and disinformation, it's much easier to detect the interactions that happen at speed that normally wouldn't happen for a particular topic, then just check every and each message, every and each picture. Yeah.
I think we're going to go to the room. There's a question at the back there.
Hi, thanks. Alana Lajwa O'Malley. I'm at Dalhousie. So my question is about, I guess, how we respond to Gen AI, but I'm just sort of interested in hearing your reflections, filtering them through some of the conversation that happened this morning. So this morning we heard about how the left tries to get facts to speak for itself while the right does more around strategic communication. And we've been talking about, what we've been hearing about a lot from you and earlier today was about how entities like fossil fuel corporations are essentially figuring out how to use digital tools to influence perceptions of truth. And we've been talking about different solutions, right? So one solution is for us to figure out how to do the same thing. And sort of on the other extreme is for us to make it harder to do that, right? Through legislation and regulation. So I guess the question I have is, if as we talked about earlier today, there's this idea of like the importance of having some sense of shared truth or reality in our democracies. What's our response? What sort of on that spectrum of us figuring out how to essentially game the digital systems too, or leverage them versus making it harder to do that? Where do we, as people wanting to advance sort of climate justice, where do we fit into that conversation? What do we do?
Okay, and we're going to take a second question. Was there another person? Sorry. Yeah, go ahead right here.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm a comedian. I have a YouTube channel called The Goose Media, and my comment about deleting your cat. I hope it's all in good fun, right? We're all in good fun. Somewhat similar to that, actually, I wanted to ask about, in progressive spaces, there's this taboo against using AI because it's bad for the environment, right? At the same time, people who don't care about that are using it to spread disinformation, and from a sort of evolutionary, sort of analysis, they're out competing in the marketplace of the attention economy. So, as someone who is online all the time, I'm left with this this question: do I use the tools that are destroying the environment in order to try to help the cause, or do I just leave that on the table and make my job harder and just cede ground to people who want to destroy everything for money?
Okay.
They get something in return.
Okay. So we had two questions there. I'm going to see who wants to bite on what from the panel. Go ahead, Anatoly.
Maybe I'll bite on this last one question about, should we use it, should we not? And I think, Alex, you were inclined saying maybe we should make a choice not to use it. But I wonder, do we really have a choice, really? I mean, unless you're not going to participate in digital economy, in online communities, which is where people are, where we do banking, where we socialize, get news. Like, it's really not impossible, in my view, to just say no. You go to Google, you are using those tools. You open Microsoft Word, you're using those tools. So I don't see any scenario where if you want to participate in this digital economy, you can just opt out. So I think instead we do need to focus on some of the solutions that my colleagues, panelists raised and I'm talking about. And I like the idea of, instead of waiting for platforms, make the tools more transparent. I like, projects like Patrick you were mentioning, where you're trying to kind of audit, to demystify the black box by actually prompting different models. And that's what we scientists, we do. We don't wait for platforms, we create our own tools to audit them.
Yeah, first off, the predicament that you mentioned, I think it's an interesting one. It makes me think of also the argument that fossil fuel companies are using in Canada. Let's export natural gas to help quicken the energy transition, right? So there's a lot of parallels with a lot of messaging that we're seeing in fossil fuels. It's a tough one, but I think how can we use those tools effectively is certainly worth it. One of the slides I was going to put up actually, there's a subreddit, which is, I think, there's a bunch, but it's like AI agents, and it had this like 17-year-old sort of person who put up his work plan on N8N, which was how to make a digital influencer from using the Google's Nano Banana to make an image, to how to modify. All this you could do in half an hour, right? To make a photorealistic video image with a real automated voice for influencers. So it becomes this arms race, and then we sort of quickly get into this sort of dead internet theory type argument where you have left and right just endlessly generating sort of content and stuff. So it really is a predicament on how to use it. But the left's very good at sort of arguing, sort of in like spending a lot of time on things. It's a challenge with these tools. But yeah, I can't read the rest of my notes. But no, thanks.
Yeah, I think there is an opportunity to tackle this in multiple layers. I think I've talked a little bit about like the long-term structural solutions and some of the incentives to platforms, but I also think there is an opportunity to harness some of these digital platforms for really immediate and effective communication. I'll highlight some of some projects that I thought were really fascinating that I've come across. One of them is called Data Center Watch, which is tracking the construction of data centers across the country. Media Justice released a really impactful report last month about the construction of data centers across the southern U.S. And how they're draining a lot of communities, both economically and environmentally. And so I think that there are a lot of organizers and organizations and folks really working to debunk some of this harmful climate discourse and mobilize and educate people on the ground using digital platforms.
Yeah, to the question of whether to use AI or not, I think it's very personal, and it really depends on each own situation. I think in my case, for example, I can totally afford not using this generative AI, GPT-like kind of thing. I can continue doing my work without it. I didn't need that before. I don't need it now, but I understand for some people it might be different, and I would say the same about other big tech products. Like it depends on each person's situation, but it's completely possible. And time not spent online, it's time potentially used to build coalitions and spend with family, communities, and in this real world, like building community essentially.
Those are important concepts, and online communities are just as important.
Sure.
But I'm wondering, Alex, have you used search engine lately, and which one you've used?
Ecosia.
Which one?
Ecosia.
And it doesn't use any AI right now.
I think it has some AI, but I just don't.
But this is just the point that
you do have to activate
even if you don't explicitly or intentionally go to ChatGPT, now you don't really have a choice anymore. Anybody who Googled today, you did in fact rely on generative AI.
Yeah, but you don't have to use Google, for example. There's a lot of alternatives that.
It's been today, you did use. And we can list going on, and they keep adding more search engine, even if they haven't, they now do.
Well, I will say it's refreshing to hear someone from Quebec's AI, institute saying, "I'm not going to intentionally use these AI technologies," which is super refreshing. Okay, we have 5 minutes left, which means I'm seeing there's a question back, but I'm seeing a question here. So go on here, and then we'll go to the.
Hello, my name is Elaine Young. I'm with the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, and thank you everyone for the conversation today. I just wanted to cycle back to this idea of uncertainty and just maybe give an example that might be one way to think about this. So in 2021, UNESCO adopted a recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence, and it was one of the first multilateral institutions to do this. So recommendations, they're not legally binding, they're meant as guidelines. So, and once they're adopted, they're very hard to change. So in developing these guidelines, working with member states, they had to grapple with this whole idea of the pace of technological change and how can we create something that will stay relevant, down the road. Some recommendations have been around for 40 years. And one of the things that Canada fought really hard for, against objections from some other member states, was to include human rights language in it, so that the principles of artificial intelligence always come back to international human rights law. So it doesn't deal with the nitty-gritty of each individual update or change, but it means that the principles guiding the development of this should be tied to international human rights law. So that might be an approach to think about in terms of tying it to existing laws or regulatory frameworks that might work going forward.
Thanks. And I'm going to ask the final question to be nice and succinct. Sorry, was there a question? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
You can take the mic.
Something of a question, and just kind of tying together some of what has been talked about here with the last panel. I'm just struck by the various levels of implication between the fossil fuel industry and AI that have come up here. I mean, we have, of course, the fossil fuel industry using AI to spread misinformation, AI companies getting, major contracts from fossil fuel companies for oil exploration, greenwashing as well. The whole idea that AI is going to solve climate change, which, the CEO of Google likes to believe for us, and so we don't have to worry about its environmental impacts. But just also the major mutual implications in the weapons industry. I think some really good tech reporting recently has shown how reliant these AI companies are on these major defense industry contracts. And of course, the fossil fuel industry needs the military industrial complex. That's its major, source of demand. So just curious, thinking about the kinds of coalitions that might be necessary to take this on, and kind of that approach to I don't know, just following those mutual implications. How do we include kind of the defense industry and anti-military action in this work when we are ramping up defense spending around the world?
Okay, and I'm getting vibes that we're kind of out of time here, so I'm going to ask each panelist to just, direct your answer, nice, succinct, final response.
The one more group I would throw within there was actually Reuters. The news organization has a side hustle, Reuters Events, where the wind has changed, where they were talking about green tech. They're talking about the use of AI for fossil fuel extraction and bringing together oil companies as a way to talk about AI. So it's an interesting sort of parallel with the arms industry to think about Reuters Events and sort of the type of seminars and people they're bringing together as well within that important mix.
Yeah, and if I were to give an answer to that, I would say that part of the answer is in the question. You've mentioned different problems and how the same actors are implicated in all of them. So I think part of the solution or the strategy should go in, trying to minimize and reduce these monopolies and concentration of power and wealth that it's actually in the hands of a few, and that can have substantial effects on a range of things that many of us care about.
Yeah, and I was going to mention something also about the structural separation and the monopolization of a lot of these industries, and how they're also so entrenched with big tech platforms, and just also mention how a lot of countries around the world have already taken up this issue around antitrust and competition and structural separation, have really thought about, seen this conglomeration of power. I think in the last year, there's been 8 or so new competition cases specifically directed towards Google across the country. And I think, just that sustained momentum is really important.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not expert on your topic, so instead I'm just going to repeat the possible solutions I mentioned or activities we should pursue. And whatever we do, we need to add transparency to the information environment, the climate information environment, other types. And to me, essentially, make it online citizens, more informed citizens. We want to have Canadians to be informed. Online citizens just as important because most of us are online. And so that means equip the users to validate what they see. So don't give them black box, but either through initiatives, academic industry partnerships, or other initiatives to demystify, certify things. So push companies to introduce standardization where they include digital fingerprinting and watermarking, where those things can be audited. And the training data is the key. We don't have clarity on how these models are trained. And my concern that one day, again, going back to Patrick's experiments where you were searching for Antifa and you got certain answers, but one day we wake up and answers will be quite different. And it could be they tweak the model, it could be just the training data set was that way, right? So we need to know what are the training data sets so we can, if we know, we can impact policies.
Well, thank you very much. We are officially out of time, so I do want to thank you. I want to thank the panelists and thank you for asking probing questions. I'll turn it over to Jennifer now, and don't forget to ask Anatoly about the Ukrainian dance.
Well, I think we could have an interesting and perhaps even entertaining discussion during our break. I want to thank this panel so much for taking us under the hood a little bit with respect to platforms and algorithms. It's obviously an integral part of this business about how we respond to mis and disinformation, to understand how information is being manipulated. And I should have qualified that by saying the extent to which we know. Because it's always astounding to me. We know what the effects are, we know what the impacts are, but there's so much that we still don't know about how these systems work. And I think it was great that you brought case studies forward about how the advertising search engines work and the kind of yields that creates and how that actually distorts our understanding, especially in the area of greenwashing. Those kinds of case studies, I think, are really important for these communities, the climate community and the mis and disinformation community coming together to do more of, so that we really do understand the information ecosystem better, so that we can respond better in how we mitigate the consequences and ensure that we have the kind of public discourse that is fitting of our democracy and is needed for the climate crisis. So thank you so much again. Please join me in thanking the panel.